Anne and Angela, thank you for being here.
Good morning. I'd just like to introduce Anne real quick. She's an associate professor at MCDB currently, and she has many awards and honors, but I thought I would really point out the ones that are related to today's topic. And so she's received the Exceptional Mentor of the Year Award from OGPS, and also she's received a teaching award for outstanding teaching of undergrads. And so she was a graduate student at Yale, and she TA'd for 2 courses and was a guest lecturer and also developed several workshops. During her postdoctoral fellowship at Madison, or University of Wisconsin-Madison, she was a guest lecturer for several courses, and then now in MCDB, she splits her time between teaching and running a lab. So I can get started with the questions that everybody submitted first, and then maybe we can proceed into an open session and take questions. And so I think the first question that a lot of people asked is, how do you manage to balance or split or somehow divide your time between not only teaching and running a lab and also being able to do outreach and still, have a personal life on the side?
Yes, I was circling how many times somebody said balance on the RSVP feedback, and it was many times. And I have to tell you, I don't have all the answers for this because it's a constant struggle for me as well. And I would say, like, over the course of a year, that balance changes. And we were just saying a little bit before the session started that the word balance is like a tough word, right? Because I think it sets up this teeter-totter situation where you feel like both of them have to really be equally in balance, teaching and research, or personal life and work life. And that word kind of sets you up for feeling like you're failing all the time. So I think some other words that I like more are like continuum. Things you're like moving on this continuum. At some times of the year you might have to be heavier on the research aspect. At other times of the year you're more on the teaching. Okay, right now I'm going to just focus on my family and recharging myself a little bit. You're always shifting within a continuum. Or another one that I had liked in a time management book I read was like a mosaic, because it's not usually 2 things we're balancing, it's like all these parts, all these aspects of our life. So I would definitely say that over the course of any given year, like I said, my time is spent in different ways at different times of year. So my teaching load in MCDB is I teach half of a big undergraduate course that's called our service course. So for my first years as a professor, I co-taught a senior level cell biology class that had been in place in MCDB for a while. So I rotated in. We changed which textbook we used, but I was able to get lecture notes from the previous people, and that was really helpful. And then since I got tenure, I've started teaching a new class that I had been arguing for a while. So squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I'm teaching a new intermediate level cell biology class that I'm really enjoying, and this is my second winter teaching that. And then the other semester, I teach the entire semester of a small seminar class that's about whatever I want it to be about. So this is the ideal situation. It takes a lot of time, but I can have it be about cytoskeletal dynamics, which I'm really interested in. We do a lot of primary literature reading. It's more like a grad level style class for senior level undergrads. And so during that semester, twice a week, every week, I'm teaching the class. And so it is taking a high amount of time. For the other semester with the service class, it's just half of the semester. So I try to, during the other half when I'm not teaching, really focus in on my research side, and then during the half I'm teaching, the teaching takes a lot. And then, of course, the other things that are taking a lot of time are when writing things come up. So grant writing, paper writing, and other kind of service requirements, which get to be more of a commitment as you move up in rank. So I'm now organizing a international conference. I have more kind of service duties within my department and within graduate programs, and so you have to kind of like find time to fit those things in too.
Yeah.
So I'm a list maker, so I always have like a long laundry list of things to do, but the other thing I really try to do is prioritize like, the things that maybe don't have deadlines but are really important. Keep those on a separate list. Like in my office I have a whiteboard, and so I put those things on my whiteboard list so that I see it every day, all the time, and kind of, remember in my mind, these are the things I really need to be working on. So that grant deadline is still a while in the future, but I need to really start building the framework for that. I need to be talking with my lab members about key preliminary data we need to get. I need to be laying the groundwork for any collaborations we need to have in place. Like the deadline is not on us yet, but I need to carve out time to do this.
Yeah.
And then there are always these things that have immediate deadlines, right? So those have to be dealt with. And I think for teaching, like it just keeps coming at you, and it can take up as much time as you kind of let it. And so you have to have some discipline.
So I'm kind of a procrastinator. So I'm one of those people who like need that deadline to get something done. So do you have any tips for someone,
Yeah. I mean, deadlines are great, and sometimes like making self-imposed deadlines or talking with other people about when you plan to get something done so that you're accountable. I think that's a really good strategy because, I'm sure a lot of you have seen like these time management squares where you have urgent, not urgent, important, not important. Have you all seen this? And so a lot of times we get stuck doing these things that are urgent and important perhaps, or we get stuck in the things that are urgent and not important, but they have a deadline and they have to get done. And then we don't spend as much time as we should on the things that are not urgent but important. So maybe if we can make ourselves some artificial deadlines or, kind of move it into that category, I think that can be a good strategy. I think, for grad students and postdocs, like finding meetings to attend can be a good strategy because then that moves it more to the urgent in terms of getting your poster in good order, trying for a talk, and
so that way you have a little more motivation to get to that next thing, as opposed to seeing it as just, well, I'm here for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a really good tip, actually. So when you're trying to balance all of these things, do you find that if you focus on one thing, it takes away from another? How do you deal with this constant tug-of-war feeling where it's like, maybe I'm not doing enough, am I doing enough? This feeling of not quite catching up to where you need to be or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think I try it, so in terms of like managing my time on a weekly basis, I try to front load the week, so I try to get a lot of stuff scheduled in the first couple days, so I feel like things are getting done. Teaching, like it is what it is. It's when the classes are scheduled. So this semester my class is Tuesday, Thursday from 11:30 to 1. I actually prefer to teach earlier in the day if possible, because on the days you're teaching, if the class isn't until 11:30, you're probably going to use the time from whenever you get in until 11:30 to do your last minute preparations, right? If the class is at 9, you're going to go with what you had the night before, right? But students don't like classes at 9, so. So on those days that I'm teaching, I also try to schedule my office hours right after when I teach, because one of the reasons I really enjoy teaching is that after I teach, I kind of feel this energy or something, especially if the class has gone well or I feel like the students were getting it, you feel kind of energized. And if you're thinking, about like research, teaching, like if you enjoy that feeling of teaching and making a connection with students and it energizes you, then that would be a good reason to try to include teaching in your in what you're doing in your career. If teaching like totally freaks you out and you hate every minute of it, then that would not be a good idea. But I generally feel energized. There are some days when I don't, but then I like to do the office hours right after teaching, because then it kind of just keeps you on that, that teaching mode. Yeah, right. I have my lab meeting on Mondays because that's usually a day that people are kind of getting set up for the week, and we do a lot of live frog embryos is what we work with. And so For the people in my lab, they're not doing as much live imaging that day, so that's a day when we can have meeting, and I also like it. Let's just do it on Monday, yep. And then I also try to schedule other meetings, kind of tile them in during those first couple days of the week, leaving Thursday and Friday with more open blocks. Because I would say that's a challenge as a professor, is finding chunks of time when you can work on those things like the writing projects that are in your not urgent but important category, and just, you could fill up all your time with meetings and stuff and never get to those things.
Yeah.
So I try to front load the week.
That's a really good piece of advice. So moving on to the teaching part, a lot of questions focused on, one, how did you get the teaching position, but also how you prep for a lecture. So maybe we can first start with how you got here. So a lot of questions had to deal with, as a postdoc, how do you find that teaching opportunity, but also maybe how do you communicate with your PI that you want to teach and that you need to take time away from lab to find that teaching opportunity.
Yeah, so maybe starting with, as a grad student, you probably have, well, you might or might not have teaching built into your grad segment. Yeah. So in my department, students are required to teach for 2 semesters. In the CMB program that I'm part of, it's 1 semester, and pathology, it's 0 semesters.
Yes, because we don't have any courses to teach.
So, you know, if as a graduate student you think you're interested in getting some teaching experience, you know, there are different ways to do it. So if you have it built in, I think GSI is a great way to do it, and choosing a class that is matched with, you know, your area of expertise, and with like actually having student contact where you're really running the show, if that's what you're interested in doing, I think that's great. If you don't have that opportunity, there are other things you can do. I think CRLT has a lot of great opportunities where you wouldn't actually be classroom teaching, but you would be learning about teaching.
Yeah.
And that was definitely something I did both in grad school and postdoc, is I think most big universities have great learning and teaching centers. And so I was involved with the one at Yale when I was a grad student, first attending, you know, sessions like this, and then later helping facilitate, like preparing future faculty sessions. And so that was a really good experience. And then at University of Wisconsin-Madison, they have a great program called the Delta program. Some of you might have heard of Joe Handelsman, who's done a lot of work in scientific teaching, using the scientific method in our teaching to make our students really do kind of curiosity-driven projects and kind of think like scientists, even if they're not doing research science. So she had been at Wisconsin before she moved on to other positions. So I got involved with their programs, and I think as a postdoc, I didn't have built-in teaching requirements, so I didn't do like any whole semester things, but I did guest lectures, like you said. So what I did is I told my advisor initially, like I think it's good practice when you start a postdoc, you want to talk with your advisor about what you think your career goal is. It may change, but so that they know in terms of setting up a research project that you might take with you if you want to start your own lab, and in terms of getting some teaching experience if that's something you care about. And so I had told my advisor, Bill Bement, like, you know, that I was interested maybe in a liberal arts college, maybe in an R1, I wasn't sure. I went to a liberal arts college for undergrad, Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota, and I had a really great experience there, and I had some excellent teachers. And so, you know, that was kind of the environment I had come from, and knew that I wanted to have teaching be part of what I was doing in the future. So Bill was more than happy to let me guest lecture for him, you know.
Oh, because he taught a course.
Yeah, so he taught a big undergrad cell biology course, and so it was a win-win because, you know, he would go give a seminar or speak at a meeting on occasion, and so I would guest lecture for him, and it took care of his need to have a sub, and it took care of my need to get some experience. And so I would sit in on a couple lectures before it was my turn, so I'd kind of see his style and what the class was like. It was intimidating because I had never had teaching like that. It was like 200 students, big lecture hall. Bill is a unique individual, if any of you know Bill Bement, and his style is different than what I knew like my style would be, so I couldn't be Bill, but that's okay. Like I tried to, you know, incorporate like some continuity with what Bill was doing, but do it in my way. And so the first time I taught a lecture that was kind of more in my wheelhouse, and then the second time I taught, it was a little bit further afield, which was good. And he, gave me advice, and he was a great mentor for the teaching too. And then after I had guest lectured for my postdoc advisor a couple times, I also let some other people in the department know that I was available. And so I guest lectured for a couple other things too. And one other thing I would say is with that Delta Teaching Center, the other thing I did as a postdoc was try to lay the groundwork for applying for a faculty position. So I went to preparing teaching statement workshops a couple times, and so I kind of got my teaching statement all written before I ever went on the job market and had them give feedback and stuff, so that when it's actually time to hit the job market, you can focus on the research aspect and kind of have the teaching statement ready to go.
So one thing you would advise is definitely, going to these centers that are there to help you with this process.
For sure.
So a question that a lot of people ask was what advice you have for people who do want to pursue a career in teaching, either the way that you do it, where you teach and both run a lab, or specifically where you just only teach. How do they set themselves up for that, and how do they show that they're really passionate about it in the interview process?
Yeah, so for MCDB, I've been part of faculty search committees, and we ask people in their applications to provide both a research statement and a teaching statement. And those teaching statements are very varied, and the amount of experience people have is quite varied. And that's okay. We're not looking for people to have a lot of teaching experience, because we know that, what we were just talking about, the opportunities can be more or less. I think if you're looking at a more teaching-focused college than University of Michigan and the grad school science department, then you might need to seek out more teaching experience. And there are some really good ways to do that. I'm forgetting the name of it. The IRACTA postdoctoral fellowships. Are people familiar with those? IRACTA is I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's an NIH-funded program that is teaching-focused plus research postdoctoral fellowships. University of Michigan has one that is joint with physiology and engineering, I believe.
It's actually all biomedical sciences.
Oh, it's expanded. Thank you. So Michigan has one, and then a bunch of other schools around the country have them. So if you go to the NIH IRACTA website, you can see where all these IRACTA postdocs are. And they provide funding, so it's attractive to the research lab that you would be looking for, that you come in as a funded postdoc, but you're also getting significant teaching experience, both learning about teaching pedagogy and then actually teaching real classes in partner small colleges that are near the university that you're at. So that's one way to get more experience. The other thing is, we have precedents for postdocs teaching whole courses in spring-summer session here at University of Michigan.
That's cool.
And I think probably other places have things like that too. If there's a teaching need and you have the experience and expertise, you might be able to teach a course. If there's a small college nearby, they might be looking for an expert teacher. So I think there would be ways to get more significant teaching experience, but it's going to take a huge amount of time. So then you'd have to have that trade-off with your research. So what we're looking for at University of Michigan MCDB for teaching statements is interest, primarily. That you've shown that you've done some teaching experiences, and that also includes mentoring for sure. So that's another thing I would really recommend as a grad student and postdoc is, when I write a teaching statement now for my tenure package, or when on my CV am talking about teaching, I'm thinking about one-on-one mentoring with my students too. That's an important part of teaching. So that's something you can definitely get as a grad student and postdoc, is mentor undergraduates, or if you're a postdoc, mentor grad students in the lab, and do it in a thoughtful way so that you can actually write about it in your teaching statement. Yeah, kind of use the students you're mentoring as guinea pigs for the future grad students you're going to have. Try some things out that you might want to do. And so I think that's what we're looking for, is a thoughtful teaching statement, that you've actually considered it and that you're interested in it and you want to grow. that we certainly get candidates who appear to have no interest in teaching, and then we're like, well, you're not really a good fit for our department. So I think showing some level of experience, but mostly interest is what's important.
Could you compare and contrast that with someone, because you also applied for positions in a med school where there probably wasn't a teaching requirement, so could you compare and contrast, how these two search committees might look for different things?
I think it really varies in med school departments because, in some other med school departments here, there is a fair amount of teaching too, right? Like in CDB,
right,
for example.
Yeah.
I had two different teaching statements. One of them was the one I sent to grad schools, and one was the one I sent to med schools. Because when I was applying to med schools, I didn't want it to appear that I was more focused on the teaching.
Right. Yeah.
So I had a little bit more like pared down teaching statement that I sent to med schools. I think another important thing you probably know about is just that the financial model is really different at med schools versus grad schools. And so I get 75% of my salary covered by LS&A because of the teaching that I do. That's a big part of my job, and so I get paid for it. And so that means that I only pay 25% of my salary off my grants. And when you're thinking about a R01, paying 50% or more of your salary off your R01, like you have to at a med school, is a big hit to your grant, which really means that you need to have 2 grants to run a decent sized lab. And so, I would go back to kind of what I said before, that if you really like teaching and that that's something that you enjoy and energizes you, being at a place that covers a larger percent of your salary for doing teaching can be a good thing. However, it takes a lot of my time.
Yes.
And so
you're getting paid for your time.
Yeah. And so you might not be able to have as large of a research program or as many grants as you would at a medical school when you're just focused on the research.
So you sort of have to determine where your own priorities are and then go off of your own interest. Cool. Moving towards starting your own lab and establishing a productive lab. One question that came up often was, how do you choose the right, quote unquote, right people to join your lab?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Okay, so I brought this book that I found very helpful when I started my lab. This one, At the Helm. They have a whole series they have At the Bench and some other ones too, but I thought At the Helm was really helpful when I was starting out. And one of the main points that they make in this book is that when you first get to that lab and you're setting up your stuff, the desire is to just fill it up with people right away, but that is a dangerous thing to do, and that you have to be filling it up with the right people.
Right.
And that it's better to kind of grow more slowly and intentionally rather than just fill it up with random people, because those first people you get are so important for kind of setting the tone of what your lab's about and how hard everybody works and how collegial you're going to be. And so choosing people that you think meet the expectations you have and that are going to be a good mesh with you and the lab culture you want to make is really important.
Yeah.
So for grad students, I think being in a place like Michigan, you've got excellent grad students. So I knew that and wanted to get my lab rolling on strong grad students. And I also knew that being at a place like Michigan, it was going to be a little harder to recruit excellent postdocs to the middle of the country when for some reason the coast seemed to be so popular. And so I was cautious about taking postdocs, until I found the right ones. And so my lab kind of grew first with grad students. I had a K99R00, which was nice to give me some additional funds at the start. So I hired a technician right away too. And she was very instrumental and helpful in getting the lab off the ground.
Did you have a specific, a vision before you even hired people? This is what I want my lab to look like, or the culture, or the environment?
Yeah, I had been in 2 great labs for my grad school and postdoc, and so those were the cultures I knew, and there were things that I liked about those cultures and things I didn't like, and so I had definitely thought about what aspects I wanted to take from the labs I'd been in and what I might want to do a little differently. So I definitely thought about that. Hiring the technician was very nerve-wracking because you only get to have an interview with them. You don't get a rotation like with grad students. And so what I did was, in this book, there's a whole section about questions to ask. So I considered that. I got like 60 applications. So I initially, narrowed it down, and then I interviewed 3 or 4 in person. And then the thing that I did that I think was probably the most helpful was called some of their references on the phone. Because you can get letters and you can try to read between the lines about what people are really saying, but they're more apt to tell you the truth on the phone than in writing. And so that was really helpful for me to have some phone conversations with references. And then, the in-person interview was really helpful too, to just kind of get a sense of
If you would match it,
Yeah.
you communicate.
When you called those people, did you do it before or after meeting the applicants? Like, you called the references to narrow the pool, or
I did.
afterward?
I think I did it after because, especially for the person I hired, I remember, that I had, a couple of questions or, things that had come up during the interview that I wanted a little more clarification on. Yeah. But I think you could do it either way. It's kind of time consuming, right? If you're going to be calling a lot of people and trying to set up things, but I think it's time well spent. And then for the grad students, something I would say is it's very overwhelming that first year. So at a place like a R1, usually the first year is, if you're in a teaching department, you have release from teaching. So the first year is focused on getting your lab set up. So I didn't have to teach, I had just a small teaching thing for a grad class my first year. And so you have all these new people in your lab. I had my technician, I had 5 rotation students the first year. And it was very overwhelming because all of a sudden, and I had some undergrads too. And so I felt like I was designing experiments for like multiple people because everybody was green and new and we were just trying to get our equipment working. And so that would be something, if you're a postdoc getting ready to start up your own lab, I would really think about what those first rotation projects can be. They are not going to be able to do the same difficulty of experiments that you are able to do right off the bat. So you need to think about some things that can kind of plug and chug, initially to get things rolling. Just so that you're not overwhelmed when all of a sudden you have some people in your lab who want to do experiments and are excited and you're like, I'm not sure what to have everyone do. So if you can lay the groundwork for that at all as a postdoc in terms of getting some reagents ready, doing cloning, getting stuff so that you have some stuff that's ready to go, that would be very helpful.
And then it sets up a productive rotation for both you and the student.
Yep. And I think, so the rotations are great in terms of choosing the right people for grad students, because you have time to check them out, they have time to check you out, and you can figure out if it's a good fit. For postdocs, again, it's more challenging because it's the shorter interview. So what I usually do with postdoc candidates is, the postdocs that I have had in my lab, I've actually met in other ways. So I've met them at meetings or when giving seminars at other universities.
That's a good way to meet them outside of just an interview.
For sure. So my first postdoc, I met him at ASCB. I went to his poster because I was interested in the topic. He came to my talk. We both liked it. We Skyped. He was in Japan at the time, so it was a big deal for him to move himself and his family and for me to make that commitment. But I felt like through our in-person interaction and our Skype, we were good. Yeah. The next postdoc I met because she went to one of the faculty lunches after I was a seminar speaker, and then she applied to my lab, and I was excited because I liked her and I had her for an on-campus interview. Another thing that I did for that student or that postdoc and other people is getting a couple other colleagues to be in on the interview and come to the talk and meet with them is really helpful when you're just kind of trying to figure out how to interview people and feel people out. If you can get another senior colleague to meet with them and get their opinion, that kind of can be helpful. I mean, in the end, you have to decide what is right for you, but
it's good to get a second opinion.
Yeah. Another thing I would say about those startup times with getting the lab culture off the ground and stuff is just start having lab meeting right away. Start defining what your lab is about. Even when it's a very small group, at the start I gave lab meeting all the time. Like we would do journal clubs, or I would, talk about something that I thought we should do, and then as people started, getting stuff done, then they would give research updates, and we would kind of change the format of lab meeting a lot over those first years as we were growing and people were getting more expertise and stuff, just to kind of make it work with who was in the lab and where they were at. But I think just starting to have that structure, like we are a lab, we meet. And then the other thing is, I think building camaraderie is important. And so I definitely started doing lab outings and activities and fun stuff because I thought that that was important. If we like each other and we know each other as people, we're more apt to work together well on our science.
Awesome.
I have a question about how much you care for independence of the first students. Because when your lab grows and there are other students that sort of can guide them through the process, then you are sort of hands-off, right? You can rely on your other students. But at the beginning, those first students, how much you value that they show independence?
Yeah, so my first two students were both very unique individuals, and you know, in their level of experience and their personality styles, and they were both great. They were just, you know, I wasn't looking for one particular thing, I guess, at the start. I was looking for people who were curious and hard workers and had, you know, were excited about the science and, you know, had the right kind of foundational skills to do well, but I guess I wasn't looking to have somebody who was definitely independent. Yeah.
I mean, so in terms, in terms of the time that you actually put in along with the grad students, the first couple of years, are you basically like doing most of the work in terms of getting the publications itself out, or is that going to take time because you let the students actually get up to speed and like, you know, those things?
Yeah, so I still did a fair amount of bench work like my first year and partway through my second year, and then probably when it came to about the third year I started easing out of the lab. Yeah, because the first year was really about getting the lab up and running and getting some people recruited. The second year my teaching started, so it took a huge amount of time preparing a new class, 2 new classes, and then the third year it was kind of grant time, right? So I had this K-99 that was running out, and so that was when I really pushed it into gear to write a R01. And so what was the rest of the question?
I mean, I was just asking, saying
Yeah.
that if the students are actually taking time, which they will, the
Yeah.
first couple of students,
Yeah.
or the first time you're starting lab, so you are having to put in more efforts, I'm assuming, the first
Yeah.
2 years at least.
So, you know, I had some projects that were kind of partially done from my postdoc that we started out with here. And so the first papers, the very first paper, I mostly wrote that paper, but my student had made strong research contributions, but we needed to get that paper out to be competitive for the first R01. And so now I really like my students to write the first draft and have more ownership of the project, but in that case we kind of needed to get it done.
Well, so building off of teaching your first class, so originally you started off with a class that already existed and then moved into teaching a class that you really wanted to teach. So what was it like for that second part, putting together a new class, preparing for, is it a lecture-based course, this new course that you're intermediate cell biology? So what was the process in preparing and developing lectures for that course?
So, yeah, this class is like a 200 level cell biology class, and we have lectures and then we have a discussion section that's run by a GSI. So the first thing I did was I contacted some people I know at other institutions and asked them about how they teach cell biology and whether they do senior level classes or intermediate level classes. And part of that was to convince our department that we should do the intermediate level class, that other places were doing this too. But then also to get their syllabi and learn what textbooks they were using and what kind of things they were including. So, you know, just kind of doing some research about what's already out there. And then you have to choose a textbook. So like I looked through several options and considered, you know, like what content I liked, what figure style I liked, what extra bells and whistles they offered. And then I'm working with a co-teacher, so we had to figure out like, you know, what topics, we can't cover everything in the textbook, so like what are the core things that we want to focus on and who's going to do what, and how do we want to make this class different from like our senior level one, like what's going to be appropriate, what's going to, who's our audience, I guess, and what do we need to offer them for this class. So for this class, we really wanted to reach out to students who might not be CMB majors, as well as students who might. So we wanted to make it accessible and, you know, kind of spark interest in this field so that maybe they would want to do research in this field, or maybe they would want to go on to a major in this field. They're sophomores, they're still deciding. But we also wanted to make it accessible to other majors who this might be their only cell biology class, but we wanted them to get interested in the field too. So so I try to kind of each semester, even once the class is developed, like, you know, when it's a brand new class, you're trying to think about all these things that you want to incorporate. But I guess once it's more steady state, each semester I try to like do something new, some innovation. And so one of the things I've been doing this semester is, I already like to do this, but in each lecture I include at least one and maybe two the scientist behind the science slides, because I feel like in our textbooks we see a lot of scientists who have made important contributions to the field. Some of them are Nobel Prize winners, some of them, you know, have made other contributions. A lot of them are white, a lot of them are male, and so I especially try to highlight scientists
Diversity in science.
behind the science who are a little more diverse. And I try to highlight first authors of papers, you know, grad students and postdocs too, so that they're a little closer in level to the undergrads who are in my class, so they can see, hey, I could do this, you know, I could contribute. So that's one thing I'm doing this semester, trying to do more of. Yeah.
Yes.
So that first year, you have a room, you have an idea and a dream. How do you get people?
Yeah, okay, so how do you get rotation students and stuff? Yeah, so I think making yourself visible on that new campus, like, I am here, I have started my lab. And so, you know, every grad program has like welcome picnics and speaker lunches, you know, faculty lunches maybe, where rotation students are checking out who's available. So I just tried to put myself out there as much as I could. Go to the picnics, go to the lunches. If there's an opportunity to, like a rotation mixer where you write a little paragraph and go around and talk to people, I just went to all that stuff so people would know that I was around. You know, if there are poster sessions for a thing, like, actively go around and talk to people at their posters. So those wouldn't be the rotation students, I guess. But yeah, just make yourself visible as much as you can, both on the campus, and then I think, like I said, for my postdocs, the way that I've gotten them is being at national meetings and going to talk to people. So I think putting yourself out there.
Did you build a lab website right away, or?
Yes, I did actually before I got here. And you know, I think that is...
The lab roster is just kind of depressing when it's just you.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
usually.
I think, like, I've definitely seen like brand new labs where they say, you know, when they're starting their lab and have the website open even before they start it, just so that people know, or if you're on Twitter or Instagram, like letting people know I'm starting my lab, I'm looking for people, you know.
And you mentioned that the first year you had 5 rotation students. That seems a lot. Do you think it was, like in hindsight, do you think it was a good idea because at least you got to choose, or it was too much and you would not recommend?
It was a lot. So the other thing I would say to answer your question and your question is making sure you're associated with graduate programs that have an influx of students. So my department has a direct admit program, and then I'm also part of CMB program. And so, like, when you're new to an institution, making sure that you associate with any grad programs that are a good fit so that different students would know about your lab and potentially be interested in your lab. And as far as having 5 rotation students, it was like a lot, but 2 of them, you know, ended up joining, and that was great to start the lab off with 2 students. So if I would have had you know, and another one who didn't join ended up being second author on our first paper out of our lab. She made like an important contribution. So like you could get great experienced rotation students who actually are actively contributing to research. So I think trying to get multiple rotation students is a fine idea. It also depends, I guess, on the length of the rotations.
Can you talk more about, you kind of mentioned like between your second and third year, like that transition when you're like not actively the one who's really doing the experiments, and you kind of have to gain this trust where you're like, okay, I didn't do this experiment. Not trust maybe isn't the right word, but like when you're not the one, not the driving force behind it, making that transition.
It's weird, and you know, it's hard to let go of that a little bit. I think a lot of us in this field are kind of type A personalities, and we like to, you know, have control, and so you have to trust that what your lab members are doing is rigorous, and how do you know that? Because you've taught them. So in the start, I would spend a lot of time training people, especially on, you know, the key, like, Xenopus injections and the microscopy, and I would do hands-on training. Now I have more senior lab members who help train the junior people, but I know that, you know, my senior people really know what they're doing. So yeah, it was a little bit weird at first, but I think what I do is I try to, so for people who've been in the lab for more than a year, we meet every 2 weeks for a kind of formal one-on-one meeting. And for people in their first year, we meet every week. And we use Evernote, and I have them write a summary of what they've been working on for the last week or 2 weeks, and drop data, raw data, into the Evernote, or we look at it on some other format. So I like to be able to like see it when it's still fresh, before it's been processed and quantified, so that, you know, even though I'm not involved in directly doing the experiment, I'm seeing the results early on so that we can try to catch if there's anything weird going on, or if this isn't the right way to go about it, or, oh, did we actually do the control we need to? This doesn't make sense. So I feel like I started realizing that even though I wasn't doing the experiments, I would still get really excited when somebody else would bring me that result. And one nice thing about it, once the lab grows a little bit, is I felt like when I was doing the experiments, I would have a lot of mood swings depending on whether my experiments were working or not. And when you're PI and you've got multiple people in the lab, it's nice because usually something is working. So it like evens out your feeling a little bit. But yeah, it was kind of a gradual stepping back of things, and then kind of trying to put into place this framework for making sure that we talk about fresh raw data, and then figure out how we're going to analyze it, and so that I'm not just looking at it in lab meeting or something. And part of that also came up because that was the same timing as when my second child was born. And so I was out of the lab a little bit that fall, and that's when we started using Evernote, actually, so that I could still communicate with people, and then we really liked it, and so that's what we continue to do now.
So sometimes everything goes well and it's nice and pink and rainbows, and sometimes it does not. Have you had any employees in your lab at any level that did not work out, and how do you deal with that early enough so that it does not affect the culture of the lab and relationships, and how do you actually deal with that person, because it's also a person you don't want to just throw them away?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of personnel management, and this is like one of the hardest things about this job, and something that you're not fully prepared for. And like on the more positive side, like even just giving feedback to those first 5 rotation students feels really weird. Like you have to do this evaluation and you're just not experienced with that. So that's again something, if you can try doing that at all with your students that you're working with as a postdoc, so you have a little practice with it, I think that would be good. So I did that with my guinea pig undergrad student, Billy Weber, thank you, Billy, where I practiced giving her evaluation while I was a postdoc. And so I think that helped a little bit. So I'm lucky that I haven't had to like fire anyone. Part of it I want to point out too is making really clear expectations from the start and trying to to deal with things before they become a big problem, I think. And part of this came out of the Delta program at Wisconsin again, which is the advice to make a lab expectations document, which I give to every new lab member, that kind of sets out my lab philosophy and core values for our lab so that they know what is expected of them from the outset. So this includes what I expect from you, research progress, literature review, communicating your work with others, participating in lab meetings and departmental seminars, collaboration within the Miller Lab and beyond, applying for independent funding, professional development, work schedule and vacation. And then it includes what you can expect from me. And so we try to have a conversation about this from the outset so we know what the expectations are. There have been a couple situations where there's been some interpersonal conflict. I think that's a common thing. And that's been dealt with in different ways. So in one case, we kind of, a couple people had come to me raising some concerns about some things that were going on. And so then I worked with that person. We kind of set up a action plan for these are some things we need to work on modifying. This is the timeline, we're going to work on it. We're going to keep checking in about it. And so I think we were able to resolve it without, getting to something more escalated. In other cases, just physically moving people so they're not on top of each other all the time, moving benches or desks can help out with things. I think talking about authorship early on is a really important one for kind of interpersonal conflict, and that things may change, but we're going to keep talking about it and be transparent about it. And just talking with individuals in our weekly meetings, if there's something that isn't quite going right, again, I try to bring it up before it becomes an escalated problem.
I had a question. So building on top of that, are there signs or are there specific things you look for in your lab to check out the temperature of each person, or just the lab environment in general?
So now I have a senior scientist in the lab who was a grad student with me and decided to stay on. And so she's a great resource in terms of helping me know what's going on in the lab. Otherwise, I try to talk to the individuals themselves, and there are certain stress points for everyone, right? Like prelims and paper, and so the people who are at those particular kind of stress points, I try to check in with more frequently and make sure things are going okay.
Yeah.
So are you going to share that, by the way, or would you mind sharing that document that you're talking about?
I would be happy to share.
Great, thank you.
So this was, shout out to the Delta program again. They had a mentoring small group, and I was very lucky that I was the one postdoc in this group of all assistant professors. Interestingly, we were all women who decided to self-organize into this mentoring group. But it was very helpful because I was seeing what all these assistant professors were dealing with, what their challenges were. And so I kind of prepared this document before I started and then modified it once I, actually realized how things were going.
So, coming back to that kind of a document which you have, so when you actually give this kind of a document to new students who actually want to join the lab, are the students actually feeling pressurized, saying that, oh my God, there's a list of things that I need to follow, rather than just talking to them and making them feel comfortable?
I don't know. I mean, this is kind of my MO, so if they're feeling too pressurized, then maybe it's not good. But I have high expectations, but I try to give people the tools they need to meet those expectations. So and I'm telling them what they can expect of me too. So it's not all this is what I expect of you, right? So I think having clear and open communication about expectations is really important in one way or another, whether this is the way that feels right to you or whether verbal conversation feels right. One of the things offered here that's really great, some of you may know about, is the More Mentoring workshops. So these are workshops put on by the More Mentoring Committee, encouraging grad students and their advisors to go together to this session to talk about what mentoring entails. It's a two-way street, kind of breaks up the mentors and the mentees for a while and then brings them back together. And one of the main points is to, over lunch, discuss expectations and how frequently we're going to meet and how authorship's going to work and kind of all these safe topics, just to make sure you're on the same page so that, you know, there aren't surprises. And, you know, grad students and postdocs are coming from all different levels of experience and past background, and I think one of the challenges as a mentor is trying to meet people where they're at, right? And sometimes if you don't like clearly lay out what the expectations are, people don't know.
I'd like to build on that question and ask how you seek evaluation from your students and how you get honest feedback. To know how you can adjust, you know, to meet them where they need to be. Yeah.
So for grad students at the end of their rotations, for PIBs, there is a section where students are asked to provide feedback. So like at the exit talk, after every rotation student, if it's in the PIBs form, or MCDB doesn't have that form, but I ask anyway at the end of the rotation, you know, like how did it go for you? You know, what could I do better? You know, did we interact enough? Did you, you know, kind of all these questions. And so that's one way, but it's definitely like, there's always this weird power balance, right? Because I'm giving you a grade for your rotation too, so I'm sure they feel awkward saying stuff. I hope that they say stuff, but so that's one way. For like more senior employees that we do like formal annual evaluations, there's also an opportunity there to go back and forth that's formalized. For other students, we look at their IDPs, or when we're preparing for committee meetings, I think that's a good time to kind of talk about how things are going. That's a good question. That's a challenging question.
You mentioned that 75% of your salary is devoted to, or it comes because of your teaching, and I was wondering if that was also taken into account in like the tenure process. Like, is your teaching evaluations and stuff like that appropriately taken into account, or is it like only publication?
Oh yeah, it's definitely important for tenure in a graduate school LS&A department. So I had to write a teaching statement, a research statement. Those were both 5-page documents, all of the course evaluations for my courses. And the department, when they evaluated my tenure package, had a section equal length evaluating my research, my teaching, and then a smaller section for service. Now, it's not the three-legged stool is not a third, a third, a third. It's probably like 50% research, 30 to 40% teaching, 10 to 20% service, something like that, I would say, in reality. But it's an important component in LS&A. And then I would say I would say at the department level, the research definitely has more of an edge. At the college level, at LS&A, they really care about the teaching. And so they care about the evaluations, they care about how many students we're interacting with on a annual basis. And so my department does a good job of making sure that we're teaching that big service class and then the smaller class so that we're getting enough student contact to meet the kind of expectations that the college has for teaching. But it's definitely an important thing. Another thing, teaching evaluations, they are not the optimal way probably to evaluate our teaching, but they are a way. And so an important thing when you're teaching is to make sure that you build into your syllabus some points, asking students to fill out the teaching evaluation and giving them some points to do it, because you want to get as full of a range of responses on those evaluations as possible. So if you have 100 students in the class, you want to have 80 to 100% participation, because if you have a much lower level of participation, you're only going to hear from the students who didn't like something, or maybe the students who really loved it. You're going to kind of miss that middle ground. And so giving some incentive for participating in the evaluation is a good idea.
Coming back a little bit to the idea that as an assistant professor you're working towards tenure, and while you probably will like it in an ideal world, there is always a risk that you won't get tenure. Does that affect in any way how you interact with your lab, and how, for example, you take new students when you're getting close to your tenure evaluation? Like the idea that you could take on a student 2 years before applying for tenure and maybe not get it, and then that student is just left there. Is that something that's ever in your mind, or something you take into account? Or
I think tenure always is kind of weighing on you those first years, but I think you gotta just go forward.
take the risk?
Yeah, I think money is the bigger concern, like making sure that you're gonna have funding for your students. That's the thing that weighs on me more. But usually you get feedback formal feedback at your third year review, and you start having a sense of where things are at for tenure. But making sure everybody's funded is a constant worry.
So right along those lines, that first year you're obviously trying to get your lab started and maybe writing your first paper. When did you actually submit your first work?
In my third year. And again, I had a K99R00, so that bought me some time. Probably if I didn't have that, it would have needed to be earlier than that.
Definitely see a lot of pressure from other faculty to instantly, your first year submit grants, and your second year submit grants, and your third year submit grants.
So, there are a lot of new faculty awards, that you can apply for, and those are great things to apply for right off the bat, but honestly, I think you need a corresponding author paper from your independent lab before you're usually competitive for R01, so it takes a little time.
All right, thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to Anne so much for